speaker is Jamala Rogers. She comes to us from St. Louis, Missouri, and the Organization for Black Struggle. Jamala is deeply involved in the development of women and increasing our full participation in society. She's challenged the for-profit prison system for decades, focusing on police violence, prison reform, wrongful convictions, and the death penalty. Jamala is a featured columnist for the St. Louis American newspaper, St. Louis's largest Black weekly, and she's the author of The Best of the Way I See It, and we have copies of her book for sale at the back. All right. I recommend it. Jamala holds leadership and membership in several organizations that share her vision for a more just and peaceful world where all people, especially children, can reach our full potential and prosper. So please give it up for Jamala Rogers.
So good afternoon, and I'm glad really to be here. I don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself a facilitator on this journey. So all of us are learning from each other. I do have to say that I've been doing it for a while, so maybe that does give me some amount of expertise, but things are changing, y'all. And so we gotta keep learning, we gotta keep growing, and we gotta keep rethinking what we're doing. I'm just gonna briefly give a synopsis of the civil rights movement because I see some young people here, and I don't want, and even not so young people, and I don't want to assume that folks understand the civil rights movement and what got us to some of the places that we are. So I'm going to start there and then move to what we need to be doing now, and then I'll end up with reading a passage from my book. Many people romanticize the civil rights movement, but as you said, and even as Anna said, there was a lot of sacrifice. One of the interesting things about the civil rights movement is that it is still being written. I just finished the book by Akinyele Umoja on We Will Shoot Back, and it's by armed rebellion in Mississippi. And many folks don't even understand what was going on then and as to why some of those reforms came. It didn't just come because people were marching, people were shooting back. So that's a piece in history that I think is sort of hidden, and he really did well to bring that out. So you have all these social movements that are in motion from 1950 up to 68, you know, fighting for sort of singular causes, the main thing being like desegregation, but more importantly, racial and political power, racial and political justice. So all of these folks are in motion. You also have contradictions between the white liberal Democratic Party and the segregationist party, and even in the country. I mean, I remember when President Kennedy told folks, and this really sort of profound quote that he did, and it's often quoted now, I've been hearing it, where he says, if those of us who don't understand, this is paraphrasing, I don't understand what it means to be of a darker hue, then let us take on that color and see what that means. And almost literally the day after he said that, the segregationists delivered the body of Edgar Memphis, because they shot him in, I mean, it might even been the next day. So it's like, here, this is what we think about you. So there's this tension going on between those folks. There's tensions within the movement about what strategy. So you had the SNCC folks up against the civil rights folks, really sort of battling it out. And I think the other piece that's not as well known is one of the also sort of factors that Johnson kept in mind was that he saw the increasing influence of folks who adhered to Marxism-Leninism. And so there was this thinking that if they didn't do some reforms soon, that this was going to be, the civil rights movement was going to be infiltrated by the communists from Russia. Now all of this was, of course, fear-mongering, but it did help to sort of do some pushing. So all of these folks were in play, and in 1964 and 1965, we have, you know, landmark legislation that that becomes the law of the land in paper only for a lot of places. And so then the struggle was not just to get that, but to continue the fight to make it real and make people's lives more meaningful in that way. So fast forward to now, where some of the things that happened were things that were not actually in our control. You had COINTELPRO, which was the program of the FBI, whose main purpose was to destroy the Black liberation movement, and in many ways that it did. You also had a lot of internal stuff that was happening in all of the movements that helped sort of suck out some of the energy in the room. And then you had the advent of drugs in our community. And so for many folks who had to sort of retreat from the movement to deal with real life family issues that was going on, that's when you start to see the beginning of mass incarceration. So there were a lot of things, both internal and external, that happened. And so there was this lull really between 1970 and 1980, 82, where all of that stuff was happening, and people were rethinking and refiguring out what is the Black liberation movement going to do. And so the other piece that was happening in there was the urban, it's gonna be all right. We're gonna win this struggle. We're gonna win. So the other things that started happening in the urban areas, particularly right after the rebellions of the late 1960s and early 1970s, was a disinvestment in urban areas. And so you see that not just here, but you see really all over the country it was happening. And so it's happening in St. Louis. All of them had different names. In St. Louis, it was Team 4. And so they come with different names, different places, different people, but it's the same disinvestment. So one of the things that I think we really have to continue is the basic fight for political and economic power. But now it needs, since we're more sophisticated than we were in the 60s and 50s, it has to be through a lens of intersectionality. So that means we have to understand race and class better. We have to understand gender politics. We have to understand sexual orientation and how it fits into this larger scheme. And that's the place that we're not doing real good at, y'all, as a movement. Within our organizations, we're still fighting against sexism. Now, why should we be doing that? Well, we got to do that when we go in the broader community. So, still fighting against racism even, and white supremacy in some of our organizations, and definitely in the overall movement. So I think one of the things that we have to really put more emphasis on, I mean, the political education piece is important, it really is. But what we haven't really done well is giving people the ability to make an analysis, because your strategy comes from your analysis. And so if you don't know how to do that and you just fighting real hard to do something, you will find that you're going to miss the mark. And so we really, I think the education piece is important, because there's learning, teaching us, and other people are learning how to be better fighters, but also better organizers, and fighting not just harder, but fighting smarter. The other thing that we need to do is to really begin to think about 2042. What happens in 2042, y'all? Somebody tell me.
Social Security?
No. It's going to be a majority people of color in this country. But we're not acting like that. We're not taking advantage and opportunities of building alliances, multiracial alliances. In fact, it seems like it's sharpened. And so that is in fact what the powers to be want us to do, to fight each other so that they still may control. And what I see is almost, if we don't do something now, we're going to be looking like South Africa, where you have the majority of people looking a certain way, and the people in power, a few, are looking another way. And we have no power. So the false divisions that they're trying to put between Koreans and African Americans, between Latinas and African Americans, and everybody else, we need to say, hold up, y'all. You know what's going on here. Our power is in us working together. So we need to really, really work on that. The other thing is really continue to find new and creative ways to organize people and resources. And I mean, people were very critical of Occupy, but Occupy did serve a purpose. I mean, it was tremendous energy that really had a lot to do with pushing the agenda forward. And I think we have to give some credit to that. And that, I mean, those are not the only things that can be done. I'm thinking about some of the participatory budget projects that are going on in different places that are trying to open up so people actually understand where power is and how to get it. And sometimes these are people who don't even know who their alderperson is or their council person. I mean, they're just getting into that, but they want to know where the power is and how to get some. And not just for themselves as individuals, but for their community, because that's really what it's about. So, you know, I think about also that some of us in the Organization for Black Struggle sent a contingent down to Jackson, Mississippi to work on the campaign of Chokwe Lumumba. I don't know if you all are familiar with that campaign, but Chokwe won. So he's about to become Jackson, Mississippi's next mayor. And he's going to have some things for them, okay? He's got a plan, they got a plan. And I think we need to be not only just looking at what happens there, but seeing how we can support that, because I think he's going to have a hard time. So those are the things I think we need to be trying to focus on now. How do we struggle with each other in a principled way against the racism in our own ranks? In St. Louis, we created an organization called the Justice Institute, because we saw this void in not just organizing skills, people learning, say, I want to learn how you do that. You know, there was really no place for that to happen, so we need to institutionalize that. But the other part about the Justice Institute is it really is creating a space for us to have the kind of political struggle that we need to about some of the issues that are facing us. And one of the ones that we're dealing with now in St. Louis is like, we're looking around and a lot of the social justice movement groups are still all white. Now that's unacceptable. You in this movement, you've been around for 20 years and you can't find no black people to be in your organization. So we're gonna tackle that. But those are some of the things I think need to happen. There needs to be increased struggle within our own ranks. So one of the things that I know that y'all been struggling with here in Point Breeze is the developers. Yes. I have, I mean, the column that I write is really about what I'm living and organizing, and so all you do is put some of your people's names in here, and it's going to be you. When I talk about education, you put some names in, it's going to be Philly. If I talk about police brutality, you put some names in here, it's going to be Philly. So these are universal issues that I'm dealing with. But there's a African-American community outside of St. Louis called Meacham Park. And Meacham Park, for the last 20-odd years, we've really been reeling. And I want to read you a piece. I actually have a whole little chapter in here because Meacham Park is dear to my heart. As an organizer, I've been helping them deal with some of the issues. In 2005, they had a young man actually execute a police officer. Why did he do that? Because these police have been like harassing the community for a long time. The thing that pushed him over the edge was the police let his 13-year-old brother die. He had an asthma attack, and they came looking for him and left that child on the floor to die. So out of his own grief, that's what happened to that police officer. But like 4 years later, another black man took a gun to the city council meeting, you know, shot up the mayor, police officers, reporters, everybody. So about 6 people were killed. That was on the news, that made national news. So Meacham Park and Kirkwood, which is the predominantly white area that's adjacent to that, got some serious issues, but this is how they chose to deal with those issues. So this was written about 1994. I know some of you may feel that St. Louis has enough of its own problems to stay on top of, but I have to give you some ink on the Meacham Park-Kirkwood battle. Meacham Park is a predominantly African-American city whose rich history dates back to the late 1800s. Like most urban areas, it has fallen on hard times over the past 20 years, grappling with issues of crime, gangs, high employment, and poverty. Add to this the crumbling infrastructure, like no paved roads. I mean, they still didn't have paved roads. No street lights, limited indoor plumbing, no police force, and you have a community ripe for developers' pickings. Enter Opus Corporation, a Minnesota-based developer at the request of Kirkwood, Missouri. Kirkwood is the predominantly white suburb. The city commissioned the St. Louis Urban League to survey Meacham Park residents on whether they wanted to join Kirkwood and under what conditions. Meacham Park residents wanted better police protection, community order, businesses, new homes, and housing for its senior citizens. Meacham Park folks would get first dibs on jobs being generated from all this development. The annexation plan went to the people for a vote and was overwhelmingly approved by both cities in 1992. Then, in true fork-tongue fashion, Kirkwood officials and Opus began revealing the real plan. Now, Opus will build a shopping center that will take up 50 acres of Meacham Park instead of the original 16 acres. That means 100 homes will be bulldozed, 1/3 of the entire Meacham Park community. To add insult to injury, when you get down to figuring out the values of those homes, you're supposed to use a formula based on assessors' appraisals and the sale of comparable homes in the neighborhood. Well, guess what? Since a home has not been sold for years in that area, there was nothing to really base the price on. So Opus gets to determine what fair market value is. In addition, since the residents represent several generations of families who lived in the same house, deeds and titles are not up to snuff in a legal way. In these cases, eminent domain was used to get the homes. The last-ditch tactic of eminent domain had not been used in Kirkwood for 125 years, but it was used on these black folks. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that the annexation is part of an overall plan to phase out Meacham Park. Incriminating information is now beginning to surface. For example, in Kirkwood's offers to Opus for development of a 135-acre site, it was pretty clear that they were sacrificing all of Meacham Park. In other words, they wanted this black community gone. Meacham Park is too much a thorn in the side of a predominantly white and affluent Kirkwood. The fight for economic and cultural justice is heating up, and residents are fighting back. The determination of Meacham Park is not rolling over without a fight. And part of what they did with that development, they put a big old Walmart there. I don't know how y'all feel about Walmart. So they got a Walmart stuck right in the middle of Meacham Park. So the struggle that you all are going through here at Point Breeze is real. It's happening not just here, but all over the communities that they don't want to exist. I'm talking about white developers. And in some cases, middle-class white people are participating in this removal. In some cases, and in the case of even Meacham Park, there were some black people thinking this was going to be a good idea. And some of them were promised homes, new homes. So it sounded like a good deal to them, but in the overall scheme of things, that community has suffered greatly. They're still fighting. The picture that's in the beginning of the book, it was Milton Turner School, which was in the predominantly black Meacham Park. It is now the home offices for Opus Corporation, the developer. They took the only historically black school and turned it into their office. I mean, that's just how, that's how sick this stuff can get. So, you know, I want to continue the discussion. I want you all to continue the fight. And we can't do it unless we're talking to each other and working together and hashing out ideas and working through differences that we have, and we have to do that in a principled way. But we got far more in common than we do in differences. And you got somebody, you got a whole system that's working 24/7. And some of us are doing this part-time because we got a whole other thing going on. Nobody's getting really paid to do this work. Some people might be, but most of us aren't. We're doing it in between family and jobs and work and school and everything else. So our efforts have to be really concentrated and really on the mark, because we don't have a whole lot of time, y'all. And the environment is just about to crash. I mean, there's lots of stuff going on around us that we got to deal with. So I'm looking forward to having a discussion. Thank you for bringing me here. It's a special on the book, but it's just for Philly folks. It's $15 instead of $19.95. So we hope you buy a book in the back with Brian. Thank you.